In conversation with Juan Maldonado. Juan Maldonado was born in New York City in 1978 and moved to a small town in New Jersey at the age of 4. He enjoyed spending his youth reading many books in the fantasy genre that transported him to a unique world filled with dragons and other fantastical creatures. They inspired him to write his own story and help and hope the readers enjoy it as much as they enjoyed writing it. He started the book in 2015 with about 10 pages, but with the death of his father later that year and other personal event, he postponed writing again until 2022, where he made a promise to himself and his son that he would finish the book in a year. He was able to complete the book in approximately 1 year between working in his full-time job as a senior project manager for e-commerce from home. He loved to write creatively and hoped that this is a first of many adventures in the world of Myrosia with Maelstrom and Maurus. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today, Juan Maldonado. How are you doing, Juan?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing very fine too, and I need to mention that you have such an amazing name pronunciation.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, Juan, I would like you to tell us about your teen and young adult dark fantasy novel, the name of That Neil Chronicles, whose description page on Amazon reads quite compellingly to me. And I would like to ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write That Neil Chronicles?
So, growing up, I read a lot of fantasy books. I was into Dungeons and Dragons, the novels that they wrote, which were like Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I wanted to write my own story. Within life and responsibilities, I never had the time, and it became a dream more than a project. And
Mm.
then in the last few years, I finally had the time to sit down and create the story. Originally, the story started off as an animation because that was my background. My background was design and animation many years ago.
Interesting.
And as the years went by, it transformed into possibly a mobile video game. And then finally, it went back to becoming a story. And that's what I developed.
It's quite amazing to know, really. I love the sound of that. Sounds to me like a lovely way into becoming a writer. An amazing introduction to becoming a writer. So thank you so much for sharing. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. And for the sake of readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what you'd expect regarding themes and subject lines, picking up Death Nail Chronicles?
I would say some of the themes that go within the book are loss, death, revenge, friendships, things of that nature. So really the themes that kind of juxtapose this book
Yeah.
are themes of death, loss, friendship, revenge, redemption at the end.
Now, a question just popped up in my head I'd love to ask you because from reading through your bio, I read about the death of your father. I wanted to ask you, how does the death of your father impacted your writing, if that's something you'd like to talk about?
So for me, the death of my father wasn't too impactful. I didn't have a close relationship with him. Really, it was the death of my mother that was more impactful to my life. And she died 10 years prior to that. She died of a massive heart attack while I was performing CPR. So it was a
Oh,
very
wow.
traumatizing experience. So in the book, I wanted to have a traumatizing death experience for the main character in order to have other people experience that and see what that's like and what that loss does to you as a person.
Quite deep and very heavy. I'd like you to show the book to the camera before we proceed, just so we see what it looks like. Beautiful cover you've got in there. Would you like to talk about the making of the cover?
So with the cover, I had an artist in England. He was a freelance artist. I was involved in some 3D artist forums many, many years ago. And I wanted somebody to draw something that had kind of the yin and yang symbol, but with dragons. So there's one dragon at the top who's undead,
Oh,
and then at the bottom there's another dragon
oh,
that's alive and kind of heroic, and then the hero of the story is front and center on the cover.
That's amazing. I love the sound of that. One of the most interesting things to me as a writer is to listen to readers' feedbacks. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that make literature to be complex in its entirety, the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. And sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. And sometimes they might hilariously mix the entire message and interpret the book upside down. And as interestingly fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your works differently than you intended? How does that make you feel?
I think everybody goes into whether it's books or other artwork with their own interpretation based on their experiences in life.
Yeah.
So someone might read this book and say, "Wow, there's a lot of anger in it,"
Mm,
or a lot of aggression. Another person might look at it as, "Wow, that character went through a lot of pain, and at the end of the day, that character kind of turned their life around or something."
yeah.
So it really is based on the experience of the individual reader, and there's no really wrong interpretation. I have what I believe the book is about, and everyone, based on the experiences they go through, they'll have a different interpretation, or they might have one similar. But there's
Yeah.
really no wrong way to look at it. It's the same way as when you look at artwork. An artist who paints a painting has an idea of what they painted their painting for and what that interpretation is. And then viewers, as they come in, there's no background to it. They just look at a painting and assume whatever it is they think that painting means to them. And the
Mm,
artist is always okay with it. And I think the same goes with literature.
yeah. Yeah, I love your take on that, and I love the way you compare the book to artworks, where you have a painting or a drawing, and even though it differs entirely, or the artist has a message to communicate through the painting, which is a form of storytelling as well, it can be interpreted based on the reader's experience, like you mentioned, based on how they can interpret it to their own personal life and, make art review out from it. So that's such an amazing one. Thank you so much for sharing. I love the sound of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I'd also like to ask you one, as authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism of our works. I'm curious to know your opinion about criticism. How do you react to, say, perhaps negative criticism of your books in case you've ever had one in the past? Not quite
So
sure.
I believe so. When I wrote this book, I
Yeah.
put it out on a few websites, and I had mixed reviews. I had two good websites, Book Nerdection, and I
Mm,
believe Reader's Favorite. They gave me, I believe, a 4 and a 5 star review on both those sites. And I
yeah.
had one on another site, I forgot the name of it, where they did not give me a good review. They gave me, I think it was like a 3 star, which I
Mm,
believe is, halfway point. And what I took from that wasn't really necessarily negative feedback. It was constructive criticism and things that maybe in this book or in a future book I could correct and do a different way.
yeah.
But for me, in this book, I felt that the criticism that was laid out by that one possibly negative review was not justified.
Mm.
And so I discarded it and decided that it wasn't something that I wanted to change in the book.
Oh,
And
wow.
their criticism was the formatting of the book. So they felt that there were many big blocks of text and they wanted it broken up into many smaller pieces, which I've seen many other books do, but I just didn't want to do it with my book. I wanted to keep my blocks of text the way they were. It
Mm.
was just my style.
Wow. I love that. I love hearing about that. And to know it's your style too sounds quite great to me. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. And I
Thank
also
you.
had there's an author that does historical fiction, famous author,
Yeah.
Raymond Curry. I speak with him on Instagram. And I actually had him read my book. And he
Mm.
doesn't write fantasy novels, he writes historical fiction. And he actually read my book and gave me constructive feedback. And I used his feedback to edit my book and make it better.
Mm.
So I feel it's something that people should do. Reach out to authors, Some of them may ignore you, but some may come back and actually give you constructive feedback and actually want to read your book.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your take on that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'd just like to ask you, because I personally have always been fascinated and taken aback by how authors, especially novelists like yourself, would sit down and craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentences make paragraphs and paragraphs make pages and pages make chapters and chapters come together to make an amazing novel, a huge one, like you just shown to the camera some times ago. And this always leave me thinking, how exactly did they got the ideas to craft these sentences, these paragraphs, these pages, these chapters, and this whole novel? And as far as writing is concerned, I'd like to ask you, how do you get the inspirations and ideas for your works? Where did they come from?
I think it comes from life experiences, the books you read. I believe something that I'm sure a lot of people don't want to hear, but it's a true fact. I
Yeah.
believe that nothing is truly original anymore. Everything
Hmm.
we create, whether it's a book,
Wow.
painting, it's inspired by something else. And as
Yeah.
a result, we take that and it's part of our new creation.
Hmm.
So nothing is truly original. You get inspiration from everything around you, and that's how you create your new book, painting, whatever arts and crafts that you create.
I love the fact that you mentioned nothing is truly original, and that's very true. Even off of all books, off of all stories, off of all works under the name fiction. I love your take on that, actually. It's very great, and I can relate to it.
Think about like Harry Potter. Is
Mm,
Harry Potter a truly original story? No. It's Lord of the Rings mixed with a little bit of Chronicles of Narnia, mixed with a
mm,
bit of Dungeons and Dragons. It's a mixture
absolutely.
of many things.
Yeah,
And she came up with that idea, but it's not really original. How many stories have we heard of a wizard, you know, saving the world all the time? It's a trope.
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and apart from that, Neil Chronicles, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
I'm actually working on two things. I'm working on a sequel to this because originally this book was supposed to be a trilogy,
Mm,
but the way I wanted to do it was that I would write one book that could stand on its own, and if it did well, then I would continue the trilogy. If it did not do well, then the book stands on its own. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's the end of the story.
oh,
So that's something that I'm working on doing an outline for right now. But I'm actually involved in writing a romance novel right now. So I'm completely switching genres and writing a romance novel now.
wow, that's
I
amazing.
figured I like to be challenged. I like to try different things. So this is my new challenge for myself.
Well, sounds like you've got a lot ongoing. I hope you find some times to sleep.
Hopefully.
Yeah, you said hopefully. Yeah, thank you. So that was funny. Yeah, yeah, I love your take on that. Thanks for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing your book and also ever since it got published?
I went the self publishing route. I tried to go through known publishing houses,
Mm,
and there was a website that I found that gave me access to a bunch of publishing agents,
yeah.
but it was a very uphill battle. It was
Mm,
rejection after rejection because they get so many submissions and they just don't really care and they don't read your material.
wow.
So after submitting, I believe it was about 200 something submissions for agents and getting a rejection on every single one over a course of 6 months, I decided that I would just self publish and see where it goes from there. So I self published on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and for me, it wasn't even about trying to make money on the product. It was more of this was a project of passion for me. It was something I always wanted to do. And I
Yeah.
did it and I put it out there. And now if it does well, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. I'm happy that I wrote what the story that I wanted to write.
Love your story and I love your motivation to this. And I love hearing what actually is a driving force towards writing this book. Thank you so much. And again, that's one of the issues we have with going the traditional route, the long time it takes to get approval, the trunk load of works involved. getting approval. It's a whole lot of work involved. Thanks for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. And now, before we wrap up for today, I'd like to ask you, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for struggling writers? And also, just in case we have some people who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of your book, on what platform is it available on for purchase? I think I've got two questions in there already: advice and purchase platforms.
So advice, I would say write what you want to write. Don't write towards an audience unless you're trying to make money. If your goal is to make money, then see what the market is, see what the most popular genre is in, and then write to that genre.
Yeah,
If your goal is to write something out of passion, like I did, then just write what you want, self publish, and put it out there.
yeah,
The key thing that I would say to the success or failure of a book is getting it to review sites and getting it marketed properly. Because if there's no marketing, no one knows about the book. That's
yeah.
the key thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. That's an amazing advice you've got in there. I'm hopeful that viewers, even including myself, would love to utilize it. Please, let's look about the purchase platforms now.
So it's on Barnes and Nobles as an ebook, and on Amazon it's an ebook, a hardback, and a paperback.
That's great. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Jan Maldonado's books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also another platform. I also left links to social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Juan, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say it's very wholesome, quite calm, gentle, beautiful, lovely having this conversation with you around the beautiful title. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure as well. Thank you.